Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name is Tim Backhurst, and today's guest is Dr. Amy Ashmore. Amy, thank you so much for joining us. If you wouldn't mind, just give us a little bit about your background and how you got into the role you have today.
Well, first of all, hi, and I'm always thrilled to be anyway involved with Florida State. I'm originally from Tallahassee, and I'm also a Florida State alumni, both my undergraduate and master's degree. So always excited to be here. But I do have a PhD from the University of Texas at Austin in kinesiology. I got into this field simply because I love being in the gym. It was a passion that I was fortunate enough to turn into a career. So these days, I am primarily involved in continuing education. So professional education for physical therapists and athletic trainers are my two primary target audiences. And of course, we also cater to strength and conditioning coaches and fitness professionals. So I have been in academics, I have been in the gyms, I have been in the athletic training facility. So I've pretty much done it all and I love it all. So that's me in a nutshell, but I am more excited to be here at Florida State and to learn about what you guys are doing in the coaching program and what the students are doing and taking any student questions. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks. And anybody watching, if you are watching, you have a question live, just be sure to put it in your chat box and we'll get it to Amy. One of the questions, or I think the conundrums that students have when they come through a kinesiology-based program, whether it be sport management or exercise science or coaching, is what do I do when I graduate? Because a lot of those degrees don't really train you to be this, as if some other degree might. You've been able to develop this into a career path for you. And I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about what that was like, because there are going to be people out there who say, I want to stay in sports. I want to be involved in sports. I don't necessarily want to work in ticket sales. I don't necessarily want to be on the court coaching, but I want to have a career in sports where maybe I'm a little bit independent of a sports team, for example. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey of developing this job that you now have?
Well, it definitely wasn't a straight path. And I think you'll hear a lot of entrepreneurs say that their journey from having an idea of what you want to do to that actually culminating in a career, the idea looks different from the reality. The one thing I can say is that I have been blessed, and I would caution any student, and I have done this when I was visiting at Florida State, and I've done it at other schools as well. I caution you to only follow exercise science as a career path if you're truly passionate about the discipline, about the content in particular, because it was my passion for the discipline that opened all the doors that it did. So we are a non-licensure profession. So it is an entrepreneur's profession, more or less, because we are not licensed. A lot of my exercise science students will go on to physical therapy. They will go on to athletic training, but the vast majority will not. So the first thing I will tell them is you have to focus. You have to find your niche, and you have to find that relatively early. I think for me, that was a lesson I learned the hard way. But I did not have any mentors when I came out of the University of Texas at Austin, and I didn't want to stay in academics. There was no one at the time that I knew of that was really just out in the field with a PhD, because they loved the content, they loved the discipline, they loved the gyms. And at that time, most of the persons were going into the business aspects of the gym, which is fine and definitely a possibility. But in the content world, you must find a niche. It doesn't have to be sports specific, but it does need to be, who am I? So for example, when someone asks me, who am I or what I do, I am a muscle physiology expert specifically to resistance training adaptations. So what happens is that translates in the real world to, I can tell you in a gym what you're doing and how you're doing it and what results you should expect or not. So the first thing I would say, and it was a hard lesson for me, is focus and niche. So that in one or two sentences, you want to be able to say who you are. But it's not going to be in a non-regulated, non-licensing career. It's not going to be point A to point B. The other thing is find those mentors. My network is my bread and butter, so to speak. My network of connections that I've built over my career, that's how I always have jobs. That's how I always have consulting gigs. That's how I always have something going on. And I always have someone to go to sell something to. So build your network, work your LinkedIn, whatever social media you may like, where your mentors are, try and build that network. So that's it in a nutshell.
The network thing is huge, and it's something
Yes.
that we hear time and time and time again in sports when we talk about jobs and finding jobs, etc. How do you go from I have this plan, I know what I'm doing, I need to now attract clients, to actually getting those clients to reach into their wallet or purse or now Venmo or wherever it is to actually pay you? Because that is a sales challenge for anybody who works in any organization. You've got to go from I've got a really great product to you should have this product and pay me for it. Do you have any suggestions for people who maybe, who knows, starting their own gym or trying to get clients to as a personal trainer, getting parents to put their kids into their team, their club team? How do you do it?
Well, number one, you create that value. You have to show that a definitive connection between the product and or service that you're providing and value or benefit to that end user.
So do
That's
you, to interrupt,
typically,
sorry to interrupt, do you therefore have data? Do you have pre-post to show this is what other programs?
testimonials are always your best bet. Word of mouth is your best bet in this industry. So referrals from other clients are going to be your best bet. So you want to collect testimonials. I've worked with emerging trainers before where I've just had to beat it into them that you must be collecting with every person you're working with a testimonial, a reference. People want to see references. They want to see testimonials. They want to see that, yes, what you've done in the past has yielded positive results, that you have satisfied customers. When it comes to data, your business to business clients will be interested in data. Your business to consumer clients will not be swayed by data. But when it comes to sales, it's a personal connection too. I mean, I've taken the same exact product to two very similar businesses, and this happened recently. One person and I just, there was no connection, there was no chemistry with me and that person in that leadership position. Then I went to their direct competitor the next week and had a meeting, and leadership and I connected. It was great. It was a personal connection. And we closed a deal within a matter of hours. So what can happen is I think a lot of people tend to forget this one-on-one too. Try to get people on the phone these days. Try to get people on video calls, like what Tim and I are doing right now. Try and go face to face if you can. I've driven, I live in Vegas, drive to that building and speak to people. That personal connection is invaluable. I would also recommend, when we back up and Tim asked me about a plan, this is another hard lesson for me. I never had a business plan. It's just a passion that I was able to turn into a career because I was so passionate. I was so out there all the time. Not everybody's like that. And I do regret not putting together a firm business plan or plan of action. So I would suggest to students as they're coming out of school, and it could just be for you, put together that initial proposal, put your ideas in writing.
I'm just taking notes before I forget. So you now work in the world of professional education, professional development, and you mentioned athletic training, physical therapy, strength and conditioning being those areas. What education do you think these people need to have? Because in coaching, most of the coaches that I see and work with, they know how to execute a game plan. They know how to teach techniques. But where we often see holes or gaps in the knowledge is the working with people, interacting with parents, boosters, fundraising, business plan, as you talked about. Those are the gaps that we see. What are you seeing in your fields?
Well, it's funny you mentioned parents. I think that's always an obstacle. And that's something one of my vendors and I talked about yesterday, is trying to put together more content for specifically for coaches who do work with youth. The performance elements, the safety elements, and then yes, communicating with parents. Now, I've actually seen recently where they put together action plans, or I guess that's the best way to put it, is an action plan of best practices for addressing typical parental concerns or problems that come up. I think anyone who works in youth sports and youth coaching will recognize and agree with me when I say the biggest obstacle is the overzealous, over-involved parent. Unrealistic expectations, living vicariously through the child. And it's one of the reasons I know some of the top trainers will not work with student athletes under 18, simply because they do not want to deal with the parent. So I think one of the things is to go without plugging some of these large professional educators is there are databases out there that do have continuing education programs that are dual enrollment with psychology, for example, with counseling. We see a lot of crossover in continuing education between athletic training now and things like counseling, social work, definitely physical therapy, but other aspects of mental health, which is also, we sometimes have our own courses in athletic training specifically geared towards mental health in youth. And so I would say never stop learning, because what you get in academics is not necessarily what we disseminate in professional education. My favorite aspect of my job now is that I get to evaluate, which means I get to sit through top level physical therapy, DPT, athletic training, human performance coach content by leading authorities. And so every day I'm learning. And then I do try to go outside of my comfort zone too. So I would definitely say to students, once you get that degree, the learning has just started. You have a foundation, not a stopping point by any stretch of the imagination. And these guys out here that are the human performance coaches, elite level coaches, and some of our ATCs, these guys are learning still every day. We have performance centers that provide education specifically to some of the larger ATCs. So you want to keep learning every day. And it also doesn't have to be something that's your area of expertise. When I take a course over in psychology, for example, that's definitely not my area of expertise, but I learn.
Yeah, I've been discussing this with our students about the idea of actually extending your knowledge beyond the sport that you play or coach, because we can learn so much from what other people are doing, even outside of sports, and apply it to our own world. But yet, in academia, we see so much specialization where you're kind of anticipated to do your undergrad, your master's, your PhD in this, and this, which leads you to become an expert in this small area, but you don't necessarily understand how that small area fits with all of these other areas, and you're not seeing the big picture to some extent. Do you see that with some of the people you're working with, or is it a case of they're learning beyond the scope of their expertise as well?
I tend to see out in the field, the problem is the lack of focus, and especially in youth, when or younger students, when they come out, that they just want to do everything.
When you say do everything, what do you mean by that? Sport?
They're open. It's a common problem when young people leave school. I understand from your perspective what you're saying, and I would agree with you from an academic perspective that we will be like, so unifocused on one area of expertise. But let's say we get a kid that comes out of an exercise science program and they want to be a strength and conditioning coach or human performance coach or sports specific coach, and they cast a net that's way too wide, is what I'm trying to say, coming right out. So nobody really knows who you are and what you're trying to do. So when you're looking at these job databases, for example, one of the things I've heard human resources complain about when I was in a leadership role was that there's some people who just apply for everything. So let's say I've had a student at Florida State, for example, who was very interested in the UFC and working with them. Well, you would caution this student who maybe at first would be like, oh, I'm willing to do anything to get in the foot in the door. And that may sound like a good idea, but what happens is if you apply to say to everything, you don't look serious about anything.
I get what you're saying. I think you're taking it from the career point of view. I was taking it from the knowledge point of view of, if you're coming out with a degree in exercise science, read some work on nutrition, because nutrition has a huge impact on how you maybe do your personal training. That's where I was trying to get at.
Yeah, and I think we can integrate what we're both saying into something that's really helpful to students. One, yes, focus who you are and focus your job search. But when you go into professional education opportunities, like you have to keep your CSCS, so you have to do your professional development credit, so you have to keep your athletic training license, so you have to do your professional development credits. I think, like you're saying, I would totally 100% agree with you and say your best bet is to include PDs outside of your area of expertise. It's fun, it's exciting, it keeps it interesting, it broadens your base of appeal. Once you get a foot in the door and you can define who you are, because even to date, when I give lectures or webinars in physical therapy, they request my recent professional development credits. People want to see that you are continuing to learn.
Yeah, great points. Thinking about what you do now for continuing education and providing training for others, I'm curious also as an entrepreneur, I'm curious, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced that other people seeking to maybe follow in your footsteps should be aware of?
Ooh, now you're talking specifically about continuing the continuing education business. You're talking,
Yeah, you just in terms of you've managed to find a path for yourself where you can make a living working a little bit outside the normal traditional 9-to-5 job. I work for this organization and this is all I do.
yeah,
I think a lot of people want to do that. They want to
yeah.
be, to some extent, their own boss. They want to control what they do and when they do it. How
The,
do you do it?
the first thing I would say as I hear you say that is, and this is something another friend of mine who's a gym owner once said, and I would totally agree with her. People think in error that entrepreneurship is glamorous.
Mm-hmm.
It is anything but. That's the number one thing to remember. The number two thing to remember is that in order to be an entrepreneur and be successful at it, I have learned the number one trait that you have to have is the ability to tolerate a very, very high degree of psychological discomfort. As an entrepreneur, you are going to be uncomfortable a lot. You're going to be anxious. You're going to be under pressure. You're going to take rejection around the clock. You are the face of your business. You are out there all the time. People are going to put stuff on the internet that you don't like the way you look, you don't like the way you sound. People are going to evaluate you around the clock. There are thousands and thousands of evaluations of me on the internet. Most of them are positive. The ones that are negative are brutal. You cannot discredit. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to have thick skin. It is not easy. It's not fun. It's fun now for me. So yes, I will say that. It is a lot of fun now, but it takes 20 years to get to this point. You cannot be an entrepreneur if you do not like marketing yourself, if you do not like the sales process, and you cannot be an entrepreneur if you are not passionate about what you're selling. Like, I love this content. I believe that this content, strength and conditioning, weightlifting, changes people's lives. Not just athletes, but everyone from kids to people struggling with weight, to people struggling with disabilities, to the average 55-year-old. I absolutely love strength training. So that's number one. Remember, entrepreneurship is not glamorous. And if you can't manage money as well. So let's say in 2016, I loved a leadership role and went from doing very well to back to zero because I had to rebuild. And so that was 24 months of not feeling too great. It was scary. You have to borrow money and you have to believe in your capability to earn that money back and pay it back and keep going to get where you want to go. So I caution people on entrepreneurship, but I also tell them, if you can tolerate that psychological discomfort and keep pushing forward and believe in yourself and what you're doing, I guarantee you can build the most idyllic lifestyle that you envision.
That's great content. Great content.
And work around the clock. That's another thing. I work 7 days a week. Sometimes I'm on these horrible 5:30 a.m. webinars in the UK. That's not glamorous.
No, I understand. I was presenting to Pakistan earlier this year at 1 a.m.
So that's not glamorous, but it's fun.
No. Yeah. Yes,
in the end.
I want to be thoughtful of your time. What advice do you have for coaches specifically? We obviously run a coaching education program. We have some sports administrators in there, but it's primarily coaches. And based on your experiences working with a variety of people who I would consider coaches as well, right? Strength and conditioning, athletic training, physical therapy, they all coach in some way. What advice do you have for them?
The most successful coaches are authentic. They are genuine. They are true to themselves. And by virtue of that, they connect with their athletes and their clients. And that's why they're successful. The poser, the faker, nobody's interested in that person. I'm thinking in particular out here in Vegas, there's one sports-specific coach who's very authentic. He's who he is. He's very successful. There's another one who constantly inundates us with himself on the internet and is not authentic and is not near as successful as the person who is authentic, who is genuine, who does want to see his athletes succeed, even if he's in the background. As a coach, it's about empowering other people to succeed and you being okay in the background. That's what I learned when I came out here to Vegas. Sorry, about knocked myself over. To Vegas in the late 90s, early 2000s with boxing, is the greatest coaches in the world. They were the top level, this person in particular, the top level probably ever boxing coach. But you never heard him, rarely saw him. He was in the gym every single day. He was behind in the locker rooms and the arenas. And he, to date, is probably the most authentic person that I've ever had the honor of being around. So I would definitely say in coaching, be authentic, be yourself, and put your athletes first, and you'll be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If somebody watching in future or listening to our podcast has a question for you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
So please feel free to email me. I'd love to hear, especially from Florida State alumni, students, anyone connected with Florida State. My personal email is Amy Ashmore, PhD @gmail.com. So perfect. I would love to hear from you guys. I would welcome your questions. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Well, thank you, Amy. Appreciate your insight and expertise. And just a reminder, everybody, we try to interview somebody either once a week or once every couple of weeks on this show. So be sure to like, subscribe wherever you're watching or listening from. And on behalf of myself, Tim Baghurst, and Amy Ashmore, thank you so much for watching.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.